Okay? Another aspect is that Netanyahu might have traitors in his government, like legitimate traitors that have infiltrated. I was texting with some senior people in the IDF, and they said, Charlie, can't say too much, but let's just say the same problem you have with the left in America we have here in Israel. So there's something to think about. Just something to think about, right? Is that maybe there's some people within those intel agencies that aren't as sympathetic.
Before we dive into the full story, comment where you're watching from and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Now here's where things take a turn nobody expected. The headlines told us that Tyler Robinson was the one arrested for the so-called assassination of Charlie Kirk. And right on cue, Donald Trump rushed out to publicly thank the FBI and the governor for their hard work. But here's the thing. What hard work are we even talking about? The evidence they claimed to have was barely more than a couple of footprints and a palm print. No grand investigation, no brilliant forensic breakthrough. In fact, the real lead didn't even come from law enforcement. It came from the suspect's own father, who was the one that went to the authorities. That's the uncomfortable truth hiding behind all the official praise. And when you step back, you start to notice a pattern. Over the past 2 years, Charlie Kirk has made headlines for his takes on abortion, gun rights, education, the MAGA movement, and even gender identity. These are hot-button issues, sure, the kind of topics that always divide people, but none of those really explain why someone would go to the extreme of trying to silence him permanently. The one issue that stands out, the one topic that could shake things up in ways far more dangerous than a culture war soundbite, wasn't about American politics at all. It was about Israel. And not the familiar debates about Gaza or accusations of genocide. No, what Kirk was hinting at was something far more uncomfortable, what Israel is doing inside its own borders. That's where the story begins to unravel, and where you can feel the room go silent every time he brings it up.
I've been to Israel many times. The whole country's a fortress. When I first heard this story, I still have the same gut instinct that I did initially. I find this very hard to believe. I've been to that Gaza border. You cannot go 10 feet without running into a 19-year-old with an AR-15 or an automatic machine gun that is an IDF soldier. Right? The whole country is surveilled. And so let me just kind of go through this. We don't talk about Israeli politics very often, and most Americans don't know this. The last 9 months, Israel was on the brink of civil war. It's not an exaggeration. This judicial stuff, there were hundreds of thousands of Israelis taking to the streets because Bibi Netanyahu was basically redefining the Israeli constitution. That's not an exaggeration, right? He said the judicial branch has too much power. There were protests planned this week against Netanyahu, where they anticipated tens of thousands of people to take to the streets. That's all gone, Patrick. Netanyahu now has an emergency government and a mandate to lead. I'm not willing to go so far that saying that Netanyahu knew or there was intelligence here, but I think some questions need to be asked. Was there a stand down order? Was there a stand down order? 6 hours? I don't believe it. Israel's the size of New Jersey. When I took a helicopter ride from Jerusalem to the Gaza border, it's 45 minutes. Wow. 6 hours. They're live streaming the killing of Jews. Did somebody in the government say stand down? That is a legitimate, non-conspiracy question. The whole country is the IDF. The whole country is. Yep. And you're trying to tell me that they're going to concerts and kibbutzes and schools and by reports 6 hours. Let's say it's 3 hours.
That's suspect. Go ahead, Rob.
It's also not like a right-wing reporting. This is from the New York Times. The long wait for help as massacre unfolds in Israel. I can't think of a more liberal news outlet than the New York Times.
And by the way, I'm actually very pro-Israel. So let me be very, so I'm not exactly.
Well, I think we all are.
No, I just want to make sure my position is clear here. But so Patrick, there are other explanations. It's possible that the Netanyahu government was double-crossed by bad agents. Okay? That's dark, but it's not as dark as what we're talking about. Okay? Another aspect is that Netanyahu might have traitors in his government, like legitimate traitors that have infiltrated. I was texting with some senior people in the IDF, and they said, Charlie, can't say too much, but let's just say the same problem you have with the left in America we have here in Israel. So there's something to think about. Just something to think about, right? Is that maybe there's some people within those intel agencies that aren't as sympathetic. Or maybe, Patrick, maybe they might have gotten a tip. They might have gotten whispers, but no one thought it would be 1,200 Jews dead. That's a potential, right?
Charlie didn't hold back. He painted a picture that anyone who's actually been to Israel knows well. The entire country feels like a fortress. He recalled his own visits to the Gaza border, pointing out that you can barely walk 10 feet without crossing paths with a young IDF soldier armed and on guard. Add to that the fact that Israel is one of the most heavily surveilled nations on the planet. cameras, checkpoints, intelligence nets everywhere, and the idea of a massive breach slipping through unnoticed sounds almost impossible. But then came the uncomfortable part, the part that froze the room. Charlie asked whether there had been a stand-down order. For those unfamiliar, that means a deliberate pause in normal operations, a temporary order for forces not to engage. In other words, the suggestion wasn't that Israel was unprepared, but that someone may have told them not to respond. And when those words left his mouth, you could feel the silence. No one dared to interrupt because deep down it didn't make sense. How could 6 hours pass while massacres were live-streamed when it takes less than an hour to fly from Jerusalem straight to the border? Even if you cut that time in half, even if you say it was 3 hours instead of 6, it's still unexplainable. That's when Charlie sharpened his point. He called it a legitimate non-conspiracy question. He reminded everyone that in Israel, the military isn't just a unit, it is the country. Soldiers are everywhere, security is constant. So when he asked if people wouldn't be angered by this contradiction, he was right. Because the question doesn't just challenge military readiness, it strikes at the heart of whether the government itself had failed, or worse, chosen not to act.
The essence of it. The essence is this. This is the closest thing to the Holocaust that any of us have lived through. But the fact is now Bibi and the Israeli hard-right government has a mandate. I gotta be careful the way I say this. They're gonna try to ethnically cleanse Gaza.
Yep.
I mean, I don't use that term lightly, okay? They're talking about basically removing 2.5 million people from there, okay? And honestly, they have a mandate to go seek justice and revenge. They do. This idea that they need to have a truce or a peace treaty, that's morally crap after you see women and children be burned alive and dragged through the streets. But there are some serious questions here, Patrick. And let me tell you, my pattern recognition over the last 5 years has become pretty sharp. COVID, Maui fires, Epstein. When I see a story and it doesn't click, our guts are usually right.
Yeah, this one's very weird.
Can I comment on the when you use the term ethnic cleansing, that will make the hairs on the back.
I'm not
of your
accusing them of that.
I'm not. I'm just saying that term. I actually did some research specifically on that because that is a very slippery slope. And if you actually want to talk about what Jews and even Christians should be most fearful of, Muslims as well, is the concept of ethnic cleansing. So
I just want to be very sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
I'm saying that's what they're going to be accused of.
Correct.
But if there are some people in public life in Israel that, Patrick, what did your pilot guy say? I want only Jews in Israel, right? Okay, that is a form of ethnically cleansing because 20% of Israel is Arab. Muslim.
Correct.
20%.
And people.
And then came the statement that left jaws on the floor. Charlie called this attack the closest thing to the Holocaust that anyone alive today has ever witnessed. And immediately after, he warned that Israel's government was moving toward what could be described, and would surely be accused of internationally, as an attempt to ethnically cleanse Gaza. Now, pause on that for a second. You don't normally hear someone like Charlie Kirk say something that blunt, that raw. This wasn't the usual firebrand commentary on US culture wars. This wasn't abortion, education, or the MAGA movement. This was him cutting straight into one of the most sensitive and protected debates in global politics. And the moment those words left his mouth, you could practically feel the discomfort in the room. Everyone on that panel started tiptoeing, carefully choosing their words, because they knew this wasn't just another hot take, it was dynamite. Think about it. He flat out dismissed the idea of a peace or truce treaty as morally empty after seeing innocent civilians burned alive and dragged through the streets. That wasn't a cautious critique, that was a thunderbolt. And here's the kicker. This wasn't some fringe activist making the claim. It was Charlie Kirk, someone with a national platform, someone whose words echo far louder in mainstream conservative circles than almost anyone else. So ask yourself, if there was ever a reason why Charlie's voice suddenly became too dangerous to tolerate, wouldn't it be this? Forget all the culture war stuff. Forget the endless debates over gender or education. This was the kind of statement that could truly rattle powerful interests. And when you rewatch that clip, you can see it on their faces. Every person on that podcast knew they had just crossed into territory that could not easily be walked back.
My plead to Israel is be precise, be focused in your retaliation. You have a moral right to go and seek the blood of the people that did this. Mm-hmm. What I think would be bad for Israel, and I have a heart for Israel. I can't tell you what it did. It made me a stronger Christian in a way I can't even tell you, right? Be able to see where our Lord rose from the dead. My heart for Israel is that they don't overreact. That and Patrick, you hear what I'm saying here, right?
That's my concern, because if they do, again, if they do overreact, I'm more coming from a place of thinking this was intentional. If they don't overreact, then this wasn't intentional. Meaning, if all of a sudden you see an all-out annihilation.
What do you mean by intentional? That they knew it was going to happen?
That no, when you're asking about the stand down 6 hours and 3 hours, then why did you? What intel are you getting? So we're on the same page.
No, fair enough.
Yeah, all I'm saying
I just wanted to make sure I understood.
If there is a major attack, it was intentional. If there's a major attack. And by the way, the number in the last however many years, the biggest number they have is 2,000, right? The Palestinians that died. That's the biggest number they've had. And in Gaza, if you look at the Gaza Strip if you can pull up the map so you can kind of show Gaza Strip, the West Bank, and where Hezbollah is coming from Lebanon. Yeah, but in West Bank, it's a different story, because in West Bank, at least 42% of Palestinians there support Hamas, but in Gaza it's 58%.
And Hamas really isn't in those regions.
Yeah, it really is not in those regions. So this is Gaza Strip, all the way to the left.
Can I emphasize though?
Sure, go for it.
Look at the cameras, the radars. Patrick, not only did they go in,
that's what I'm saying.
But hear me out here. Not only did they go into Israel, they got out of Israel with hostages.
Yeah, 100 hostages.
So you would think, let me just hear me out. There's a penetration of your border wall, okay? That you guard on a holy day, the 50-year anniversary of the Yom Kippur War. And you would think, hey, they're going to come back. Let's make sure that doesn't happen. Let's mobilize some forces. And it is not quite, but it is close to the North Korean demilitarizing.
What's weird about what you're saying that gets even more credibility is you're a pro-Israel guy.
No, that I want to be very clear.
No, fully, I know that. So I want to make sure the audience knows this. So for you to question that and for me to question, I'm like sitting here saying, how did you not know this was taking place?
What makes this whole story even more shocking is not just that militants managed to break into Israel, but that they actually left with hostages. Think about that. In one of the most fortified and surveilled nations in the world, people were able to cross in, carry out attacks, and then cross back out with captives. That isn't just alarming, it's almost unthinkable. And that's why so many people point to this as the real breaking point for Charlie. Out of every controversial thing he's ever said, whether it was on abortion, education, or cultural issues, none of it ever put him in this kind of danger. This topic, the Israel-Palestine conflict and his willingness to question the official story, that's the line that made powerful people sit up and pay attention. Now let me be clear. I've criticized Charlie plenty of times before, and I still don't agree with him on most issues. But in this particular video, I find myself siding with him. And that matters, because when you or I raise questions, it might stay in small circles. But when someone like Charlie Kirk, with his reach, his influence, and his platform, dares to say it out loud, it becomes a national conversation. That's what makes it so explosive. So here's the bottom line. This wasn't just another political rant. This was the kind of moment that shifts the narrative, the kind of commentary that makes even his harshest critics pause and say, wait a second, he's got a point. And maybe that's exactly why this story feels so heavy. Until next time, this has been The Whip Line. Thanks for tuning in.